Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Actual Fluency Podcast. This is episode 123, and today I'm joined by my friend Daniel Welsh. Daniel has been living in Spain for the last 10, 15 years, and he's coming on to share how he got there in the first place, including learning Spanish to a really high level. And the reason that I brought Daniel on is because his story, I think, really illustrates what you can do once you fully immerse yourself in a culture, including the language, of course. Many times I talk to people who learn maybe 5, 10. It's all about the quantity of languages and not so much the depth or width of them. They might have single languages that really go deeper, but in general, we're talking about learning many languages, which is really a bit of a wrong narrative because you cannot learn many languages at once. Like you have to learn one and then another. So from time to time, I really like to bring people on who kind of demonstrate the practical use of language learning and also give some tips and advice on how to actually move to a brand new country. Daniel's from America. He's moved to Madrid in Spain and completely assimilated with the local culture, and he's been living there for a while now. So he has a lot of tips and tricks with regards to that, and also how you can start your own teaching business to teach English to the local population, which could be a good way for people to live in their dream country or society, but might not be sure of where to make any money. So if your first language is English, then it should be pretty easy to get a job or get something going with the tips and tricks that Daniel is giving in this episode. So enjoy the episode, and as always, I just want to give a quick shout out to this show's sponsor, Glossica. They've been very supportive of Actual Fluency, and I really appreciate the assistance and support in bringing it out there. They basically provide audio courses and a lot of tools so you can interact with the material. It's a spaced repetition style program, so you hear the same sentences until you know them. And the really cool part, I think, is that they're kind of grammatical, the sentences. So you are constantly exploring different grammatical sides of a language, and you're sort of learning it by intuition rather than just memorizing sentences. You always have these references to go back to. So if you want to give Glossica a try, go to tryglossica.com, and they have some free trials available. And if you like it, you can subscribe to all 50 languages for a monthly fee. But otherwise, just say Chris sent you, and have fun. Enjoy the episode. Well, what I want to, just before we begin recording, I just want to kind of take a chance to address what you wrote to me in before we started this recording. Is you said something about how, I'm not really a polyglot, so I don't know why you want to talk to me, basically. I just wanted to explain why, not just for you, but also for the people listening, because the podcast itself has sort of become, like, the guests are usually people who have studied a lot of languages. They speak them to quite high levels, and that those people are quite interesting, I think, for sure, because it's kind of a very small group of people in the world. But what I'm actually really interested about is the people who have one language, one extra language they want to learn for whatever reason that may be. And I thought your story, from what I heard in Tenerife, was a perfect example of someone who embraced it, like truly embraced it. Not just like I'm, dos cervezos, por favor.
Just getting good on language, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of the time, I mean, I would call myself a language encourager. Like, I would encourage people to do more language study. I would not call myself a polyglot encourager because I don't think a lot of people have any practical need for multiple languages, at least not at the same time.
Yeah.
And let's say I speak 5 languages. Well, I can only speak one language at a time anyway.
Hmm.
So what I really think is a good kind of focus to have is to focus on the one language you want to learn right now. And if you want to become, like the Richard Simcoes of the world and learn 20 languages, that's fine. But the effort and the job to do that is just 1 plus 1, right?
Yeah, of course.
Endlessly. So that's why I wanted to bring you on, and you're a pretty cool dude as well. So it's always good to hang out, find an excuse to chat a little bit.
Thank you
Uh,
very
so if you're okay with all that, we can just dive straight into it.
Sure.
Cool. So for the listeners at home who haven't heard about you yet, do you want to just give a brief story of yourself, how you got to where you are today?
Well, sure. I moved to Madrid, Spain when I was 21 years old. And, before that, I had done high school Spanish and a very minimal amount of university Spanish. But I found myself in Madrid really having to speak Spanish every day, for hours every day. And, that was 14 years ago, basically. So I've had a lot of time to improve. And yeah, I mean, I also was teaching English, so now I'm a blogger and YouTuber and author and any number of things where I create language learning materials for English-speaking people. No, for people who want to learn to speak English, for Spanish-speaking people who want to learn to speak English. And yeah, that's about it.
Super cool. So what made you make that move originally? What drew you to Spain?
Well, I really was always looking for a way to get out of Arizona. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, which is, with no offense to anybody, not the most exciting cosmopolitan place in the world. And so I just always wanted to have a different kind of life that I wasn't going to be able to have there. And I looked into a couple of options. In the summer of 2004, I was in Spain with my father, and we, were wandering around taking this whole let's see Spain and France in 2 weeks thing, see Europe in 2 weeks like American people do. And I met a girl who was living in Madrid, blah, blah, blah. It seemed like a better place to come than to come to somewhere where I knew absolutely no one. So I was looking into Argentina at the time, and I guess they were just finishing up their huge crisis. Spain was booming, and so I ended up in Spain.
Right. And were there any difficulties in terms of visas or that kind of thing, or were they pretty
Oh, yes.
accommodating?
People like to ask this question on public forums, and well, I'll answer. I came with just a tourist visa and overstayed the tourist visa, and I do not recommend anyone else does this. It's a bad idea. Spain has a process where if you hang around long enough and can document, yourself, and you have a job offer and you're reasonably integrated into Spanish society, they will eventually give you the visa. But in my case, it took 7 years. So,
Wow.
unless you're really in this for the long haul, I recommend trying to get a student visa or something beforehand.
Right, because that's obviously always a problem. A lot of people, myself included, always look to experience different cultures, maybe even trying to live there for an extended period of time, but find ourselves sort of limited by some of the visas to, 3 months, or maybe
Yeah.
even less in some cases. So it's more that kind of. I wasn't trying to get any, let's say, incriminating evidence out of you from ages ago, but
No, no. It's really, yeah, it's a big deal for, people who want to see the world, is you're just always going to have to be dealing with bureaucracy in some way.
yeah,
Struggling with bureaucracy. I just accepted it long ago that, okay, struggle with bureaucracy is part of my life, and that's it. So
yeah. And the
here we go.
Spanish, I guess, notoriously not great with bureaucracy in general, not just visas. I guess the times to get anything done, going to official bodies for paperwork and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff, I guess it's not. I mean, they don't hurry, do they, with these things?
Stuff is slow, but the fact that I was able to show up on a tourist visa and end up eventually with, permanent residency is a lot better than the US, for example, where I'm from. There's lots of people who just kind of show up in the US and 20 years later they still have no visa and,
Mm.
all kinds of big problems. So I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to legalize my situation in Spain.
But yeah, but that's really cool. I think that they have that kind of practice. I don't know how many countries actually do that,
I have no idea.
where that's possible, but it's cool that it worked out for you, definitely.
Yeah. And I think it's a great idea for political reasons too, because all I wanted to do was, you know, work hard and pay taxes, and here we are, working hard and paying taxes.
Exactly, yeah. That should always be encouraged. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure the countries, what they fear is that people come and try and sort of take advantage of any social systems that might be present in the
Uh,
countries. But if you just want to do your thing and go to work, pay your taxes, then I really think a lot of visa requirements should be reduced in many countries.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a tough question for some other podcast, I'm sure, dealing with the wanderlust of
Yeah.
visas. But take us back to that time when you started, when you came to Spain. Of course, with the language itself in focus. You said you had in school. Is it how prevalent is Spanish in the American school system?
Well, okay, so in the American school system, I would think it's got to be the number one language. And in my school, we only had two options. We had Spanish and French.
Hmm.
Now there are more options in my area, but yeah, it was Spanish and French. In Spanish, at least, we have a significant population of people from, Central America in the Southwest U.S. So, there's Spanish didn't seem so abstract. I didn't have a lot of opportunities to speak Spanish or necessity to speak Spanish when I was growing up, but eventually I got a job working in a kitchen. There were some Mexican guys in the kitchen, and we would speak Spanish when we were on shift, and that was a lot of fun. That was my first, engagement with actual conversational Spanish outside of a classroom, and that was awesome for me.
Right, and I guess that must have really helped you in turning the classroom style learning into more practical knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I don't even know that I enjoy studying languages. What I like is just, learning the very basics and then going and making an idiot of myself by trying to get into conversations with people. And so, that really worked out well as a strategy.
Yeah, is that what you did when you got to Madrid as well?
Yeah, basically. It was 2004, so we didn't have smartphones. We couldn't go around Google translating everything all the time.
Right.
I would carry a little, pocket-sized dictionary around with me if I really, really needed it, but that's not real comfortable either. And otherwise, I just kind of get into conversations with people,
Right.
see where it led.
It sounds so effortless when you put it like that, but how long did it take you to get to a comfortable level where you could, well, I wouldn't say fluent, that's a kind of a loaded word in these contexts, but like give us some time frames. What do you think?
I mean, I did all the grammar stuff in high school, which was 4 years, and then, my semester of university, which was a semester, and then, in probably within 6 months to a year of, just speaking every day, I was pretty good.
Hmm.
However, everyone has their definition of pretty good, and there's plenty of people who tell me, "Oh yeah, Daniel, your Spanish used to suck."
That's
I,
nice of them.
yeah, I don't even remember ever thinking, "Wow, my Spanish sucks." I was always just like, "This is awesome. I can, kind of speak another language." But they have their idea of what fluent Spanish sounds like, and I've, probably never reached that standard.
Right.
I always have my accent, and up until 2 days ago at the gym, somebody asked me where I'm from, and I told him I'd been living in Madrid, and he's like, "Ah, that's why you speak a little bit of Spanish." I'm like, I didn't want to argue with him and be like, "What are you talking about, a little bit of Spanish?" But it still happens that people hear the accent and they just assume that you have a pretty low level.
Yeah.
Not always true.
I think that's really funny. I tried a similar one where, when you go out to people, they don't really know what you've been doing, or you meet new people in a new workplace, for instance, and you say, "Oh, I've been learning a bit of Russian on the side for myself at home," and they're like, "Oh, okay, so you can say a few words then," and it's like, "Yeah, I've sort of been doing this for ages and can do conversations and stuff, but yeah, you think I can say how are you and can I have two beers, but that's all right. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, it's hard to define fluency, as you said, and if you're just defining fluency as you can string two sentences together, then yeah. But I don't know. A lot of people, I think, make the mistake of wanting to speak perfectly, and they think they'll they'll start speaking as soon as they know absolutely everything about the grammar, and then they'll
Mm.
speak quickly. And that never works.
No, because try a language like Russian, I mean, you never know all the grammar really, unless you're
Yeah,
some kind of machine.
yeah,
It's just too much. But I think that is genuinely a problem. So it's great that you had the natural inclination to do the opposite and just kind of dive into it.
yeah. It's really paid off, and even now, people occasionally take me aside and they're like trying to tell me some things that I've done wrong grammatically, and it's like, yeah, okay, I remember. I probably learned that when I was 16. Haven't thought about it since. I'm just trying to say stuff that sounds good to me, and ideally that I've heard somebody else say, and there you go.
Right. Yeah, it's well, you don't need to be flawless. I don't think native speakers are anyway, so it's kind of unfair that
Yeah,
non-native speakers are being judged at that level.
yeah.
Um,
Of course, our friend Ollie has videos about like how to use the subjunctive in Spanish, and it's great that he knows that. I would not be able to tell you very much about how to use the subjunctive in Spanish. It's just
yeah,
one of the things that I've picked it up along the way, and if I do it badly, then I do it badly. But I couldn't tell you the 24 reasons why you use the subjunctives in Spanish.
right. So for those who don't know, it's like the if I could have done that, I would have, or it's a some kind of what do you call it?
It's
Well,
a
how would you say it?
grammatical mood, I believe, and you use it for sort of hypothetical things,
Right.
unknown things, things where there's more emotion involved.
Yeah, they love that in German as well. And I guess English also has it in British English they use it a lot as well. Like, could I have that instead of can I have that? You know, when you order
Yeah,
at Starbucks.
and consider them, we use the past to be more hypothetical, which is about all we do.
Yeah, yeah. English luckily not as difficult as some languages, but there are other problems I guess with pronunciation and kind of a strange uh, pattern there where there's no rhyme or reason to it at all.
Yeah, I've been teaching English, both to people and online, both to people face to face and online since 2004, 2005, when I moved to Madrid. And yeah, the pronunciation is usually the big issue for.
Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick break here and give a shout out to the sponsor of today's show, which is Glossica. Glossica have been extremely supportive of the Actual Fluency podcast and website over the years, and I'm really thankful and grateful that they wanted to come on board for this kind of re-release of the podcast, this new era. And what is Glossica? Well, essentially, it's kind of like a spaced repetition system, but with audio-based sentences. So you have listening practice, you have speaking practice, and every day you can do reps. So you log on to the Glossica site, and the software, using some fancy AI technology, actually places you on your skill level and suggests sentences and content that are appropriate. And what I really like is you can log on to Glossica and just press a button, and it will do all the reps you need for that day. This is in contrast to other websites where you have to constantly click or type, and there's merit to that. But I really like Glossica's approach as well. So if you want to get started with Glossica, check it out at actualfluency.com/Glossica. How did you decide to get into teaching? Was that just, well, this is my kind of MO, I'm an American in Madrid. This is one of the sought after skills that people have here, or did you put
Um,
any deeper reasons into it?
it would be so great if I could say there was a deep reason. I, um, I looked at, the possibility of working in a bar or something and saw what that kind of work looked like in Spain and decided not to do it.
Mm.
I ended up teaching. And yeah, I was expecting to hate it and to, do it for a few months and then come up with something else. But in the end, it ended up being a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm happy to
Interesting.
have that experience.
So how did you go about it? Did you put a posted in Starbucks, or did you take a course, some kind of CELTA-ish thing, or how do you start becoming a teacher when you've just landed in a foreign country?
Yeah, I took a CELTA. We had enough internet that I could find out there was like a CELTA course that was starting the next month, and so I took a CELTA in December of 2004, and we finished just before Christmas. And so I went and I handed out some CVs in different language schools in Madrid. And I don't know exactly what it's like now, but it was pretty easy to find a job. I started working just after the new year in the end. And the quality of the jobs is always less than miraculous, but you know, you can find a job.
Right. And it's about experience as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, and
Build up.
it's fun if you enjoy that kind of thing. I just took it as like, hey, I get to talk to people all day. I get to ask them silly questions about Spanish culture, and it's, easier and more fun than a lot of things people do to earn a living. So it was great.
Yeah. And when did you start writing about that experience online?
It's been it's been 8 years. So 2010 is when I started the
Oh,
blog.
really? So that's a couple of years after.
Yeah, 8 years. And, I just started because I had a friend who told me you could really expand your reach by, giving a few lessons online and, just having a blog. And he set me up with the simplest possible blog, and I wrote some stuff. I always liked writing. And, this is also way easier than trying to write literary fiction or something. So
Hmm.
I was able to get into that and just make a habit of writing a couple times a week. And, you know, um, about 5 years later, I was able to quit my teaching face to face and just work full time on the online stuff.
Wow. That's actually not bad. That's not bad at all, I would say, for those
In
days
five
anyway.
years, there's all these overnight success stories where people make it look like it's just like one day I was fed up with my corporate job, and day I was, living on the beach in Thailand as a high paid consultant. But I don't know anybody who's actually done it that fast. There's
No.
usually a lot of backstory to these, overnight successes.
Yeah. I think blogging is something that takes quite a while just for mostly I think for Google because that's the biggest traffic source for most people. You need to
Yeah,
gain some authority in terms of the web. Like you can't just become the authority on English learning after, a couple of months. So but I would highly suggest people that. In fact, I've suggested people that before. Especially I think foreign language blogs about these things because the demand can be quite high, but the actual competition can be really low. Like for instance, I have a friend who does a blog in Hungarian, and I have also have a friend, you know her, Lydia. She was writing in Slovakian, and
there you go.
all became a national celebrity. Like there's no way she. I mean, she's very talented and amazing a person, so she probably would have made a lot of success in English as well. But I think there's a lot of room today for people to write about experiences, especially with culture and language in different languages. Like you're teaching English from Spanish, which is already unique in a way.
Yeah, and the other thing that people need to think about is what is their ideal audience Googling? First off, if just having an ideal audience is a big step towards starting a successful blog. And then, they sit down to Google something. What exactly are the terms they're using? And if we're talking about Spanish people trying to learn English, then they're using Spanish to
Yeah,
try to learn English. So
of course. Yeah.
that's all you really need to think about there.
Yeah, we. I'm sure we could do episodes about the actual sort of entrepreneurial side of language blogging, but I wanted to just include it because I think a lot of people they're sitting out there. They have this amazing hobby. Let's say they're learning Chinese or something, and they have I think a really great message that could be extremely not only entertaining but also very useful to many people to follow that journey. And if you if they do it, a couple of years or however long it takes, they might find themselves in the position that you are in,
Yeah.
where suddenly you can just do that full time. So I would definitely encourage people to do that. I did that myself. I wasn't able to, or so far I haven't been able to, build up actual fluency to a serious full time venture, but definitely build it up to if I was living in a slightly lower cost of living country, I could definitely do it. So,
Yeah.
and I'm on my fifth year as well, so it's not overnight either.
Yeah, if you actually find somebody who legitimately becomes successful at something big like this overnight, then let me know because I would love to interview them about it.
Yeah, get all the secrets out. I don't
Yeah,
think it's possible,
I
but
don't really think there is a secret. I think hard work over a long period of time is the secret.
yeah, for
That's
sure.
what most people don't want to do. It's exactly the same as learning a language. It's like people think, okay, what's the hack? It's
Yeah,
going to help me reach fluency, in 2 weeks. And it's like, yeah, hard work for a couple of years would be much more effective there.
yeah, exactly. So how did you? I assume when you were working at the language school, they give you some kind of textbook or curriculum for you to go through with the students, or did you have
Yeah.
to do it all yourself?
Yeah. Well, here's the fun thing about the fact that there's just so much demand for native English speakers as teachers in some countries is that most of us are not incredibly well qualified. At the CELTA, we learned classroom management and some basic principles behind teaching people a language, but we didn't learn grammar, for example. And so I, spent the first year or two learning the grammar sort of on my own. And I was still able to have a lot of fun in class. And if anybody learned any grammar from me, it was probably by accident. But I was just able to give them, an interesting uh, listening activity, just like let's talk and listen, and I'll teach you the pronunciation of some things, and you can listen to my ridiculous cowboy accent that I sort of had difficulty dropping. And yeah, it was a lot of fun, but probably I sort of hit my stride in after about 2 years teaching when I understood the grammar on a high enough level that I could actually explain stuff. Like I can
Right.
explain a lot of stuff in English now that just native speakers don't think about because we just do it.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. And and how did you pivot that into the online platform? When did that happen? I assume that was down the road as well.
Yeah, that was 8 years ago again in 2010. And yeah, basically, I started just writing about a few of the basic principles like, improve your vocabulary by reading and things like that. And then
Hmm.
I started just thinking, like, what are the questions people ask me in class all the time? And why not turn those into articles? And, that's pretty much still what I'm doing. So in class, or common errors that people will make, like Spanish people have a lot of difficulty with I'm bored or I'm boring.
I see. Yeah, and that's
They
a
don't.
dangerous one to say, to be honest.
Yeah, um, and so I've got a couple articles and videos and stuff about those sorts of adjectives now. What's the difference between I'm bored, I'm boring, I'm interested, I'm interesting, etc.
Yeah.
Just because you hear people make the same mistake over and over, and you know
Yeah,
learn to deal with their pain points there.
that's super useful, and I also think that the that must have been the sort of the success of it because those are exactly what people would be searching for.
Yeah,
What's the difference between bored and boring? I'm sure
yeah,
people would search for that directly.
yeah, exactly. Not to get into the entrepreneurial aspect of blogging again, but yeah, a lot of people have a blog where it's not really clear what the utility of most of their articles is supposed to be. It's
Mm.
like it doesn't necessarily address anybody's pain point, and I've been guilty of this too. Of course, I just write something because I want to write it, and when nobody reads it, I think like, oh, that sucks, but if it can specifically address somebody's question, then that's so much better.
Yeah, And what I mean, you mentioned pronunciation. What else have you found in terms of learning English? And maybe there are some things that is not unique to Spanish speakers, but just in general with English. Like, I'm sure there are a lot of English speakers listening to this for listening practice, but also obviously to pick up some tips on how to improve themselves. So, what kind of advice would you give them from around the world, just learning the wonderful language of English?
Advice for learning English. Well, there's a lot of different things you can do. Um, One of the most common pieces of advice that I give is just read more. Like people tend to avoid reading because it's too difficult at the beginning or because they don't read very much in their first language. And yeah, you just gotta jump in and do it, even if it's difficult. And, secondly, you really have to listen in some way because with English, as we said, the pronunciation is very different than the spelling, and it's also very different than the pronunciation of Spanish or other languages. We have all these different vowels and consonant sounds, and if you're just trying to, like, people do the sort of literal transcription, like this is what it would sound like if it were Spanish, but that doesn't work at all because it's not Spanish. You need,
Right.
like, learn the International Phonetic Alphabet, for example, and figure out what things actually sound like, and try to imitate those sounds as much as you can.
Right. So see, that's I find that interesting that you would recommend reading because to me your style sounds a lot like that would be the last thing you would do for learning a language because it's
Well,
kind of like
maybe I exaggerated how much time I was spending speaking there because I was also on the bus a lot, like going to classes in different parts of the city, and so yeah, I was reading. But I was reading things that interested me. I was reading like native level stuff, even if it was very painful at the beginning. So I was reading the newspaper back when you would, buy a newspaper. I would take the newspaper around all day and I would, read the newspaper. And, I read sort of cheap paperbacks that I could find that seemed interesting to me. And so I learned a lot of vocabulary that way too. What I wasn't doing was reading a lot of adapted stuff or stuff that's only for language learners.
mm. But how did you get over any difficulties? Did you write down words you didn't know and then look them up, or how did you just take it from context?
Mostly I took it from context. And, another thing that stops people from reading is that they, see one word that they don't know and so they think they have to stop and like pull out their dictionary. And if you're just starting, you're never going to get anywhere that way. I would
Yeah.
just, and I remember it being very painful and slow at the beginning, trying to figure out what things meant. But yeah, context.
So just read through it and in the beginning don't worry so much about understanding that
Yeah,
much. Just kind of read and just get all the inputs and see the patterns and
yeah,
spelling and yeah, I think that's good advice actually. I just actually wanted because it's something I haven't done for Russian very much is to read sort of contemporary level language. So I have some old stories, Dostoevsky and all those, and they're very difficult for first of all, but they're also very old language, so they had to use different spelling, they use different phrases. Whereas the newspaper is kind of like modern language. It's not text language in the what people would send on Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or something, but it's kind of like a snapshot of what the language is today. I think the newspaper. So I actually just got a subscription for a Russian newspaper. Apparently there is one here in the UK, so they
uh-huh.
send it to my mailbox every Friday, and yeah, I can't understand everything. I can understand pretty much what the gist is of most sentences,
Yeah,
but I definitely think that if you start looking up every word you don't know or every word you're uncertain about, first of all, you're not going to read the newspaper very much because you just can't be bothered to constantly look up words. And secondly, it takes away that contextual practice where you just kind of you're just flowing through the sentences and just getting that input, which
yeah,
the brain, I mean, the brain is magical, isn't it? You just read stuff over and over, and eventually the brain is like, maybe this means this, and
yeah.
then you confirm it somehow. I don't know how it works, but it's quite amazing.
My recommendation is to only use the dictionary if it's a word that just keeps reappearing and you have no idea.
Right.
Otherwise, there's plenty of stuff you just don't need to look up. You can figure it out.
Yeah, or it's not a very important word anyway.
Yeah.
They that does happen too. But if you're reading an article about clocks and you're unsure about what clocks mean, then maybe checking that one is okay, just to get somewhere.
Yeah. On the other hand, like you can, what was it? There's this musical instrument, a lute. I remember in one of the classes I was teaching, there was this whole article about lutes that
Right.
I did for homework. It was a test preparation class, and everybody did the homework. They read through the article, and they came to class the next day, and they're like, "Daniel, what's a lute?" And but they had still managed to do a fairly good job on the homework because you don't need to know exactly what a lute is in order to. Like I don't know exactly what a lute is. It's some sort of little medieval guitar thing.
Hmm.
You don't need an in-depth knowledge of lutes in order to figure out what the text is about. Generally,
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. It's a bit like learning all the different types of fish. They're just a fish, you know. It doesn't really matter that I don't know what a like. I think animal species is some of the hardest to learn because you have words in your own language, and then in other languages they're completely different. Uh,
yeah. And how often do I need to talk about? I know the Spanish word for platypus. It's ornitorrinco.
right.
But I just think it's an interesting word. There's no reasonable circumstance in which I'm going to have to talk about a platypus.
Right. So it
And
sounds like
it's
the word
a lot of
for
animals. How many animals do you deal with? It's like you get past your cows and your horses and your
yeah,
and your
exactly.
cats.
And you don't know how the animals look anyway. So if I went to an aquarium and there was like a bunch of fish, I wouldn't have any idea what separates like a I don't know a place from a. I can't even think of two fish at the moment. So you see how that's how bad it is. Like herring, I could probably tell because they're slightly smaller fish, but
Because in the north of Europe, down here in Spain, fish is very important, and you have to know your different
ah,
fish.
right, okay, yeah.
Also, I was in an aquarium yesterday here in Barcelona, so
Did you bring an English class and show them all the English fish names?
I did not, but it was.
Oh,
I'm here in Barcelona, and it was in three languages. It was in Catalan
ah,
and Spanish and English. Everything in the museum.
wow,
So I got to do a little bit of linguistic immersion and comparing the three languages there.
that's very nice. So you're now a resident expert on the aquatics in three languages.
I guess so. Yes.
Not a small feat by any means, for sure. All right, so I think that's pretty much all I was thinking about. So is there anything else you feel? Well, first of all, I want to give you a chance to just tell people the name of your site and where they can find more about you if they wanted to look into you and some of the stuff you've been doing.
I've got a bunch of different websites. If people want to know more about life in Spain, they can go by expatmadrid.com. The title of that blog is The Chorizo Chronicles. Chorizo as in a sausage-like product. I just try to have fun on there, but I try to also give useful information about life in Spain. And if people want more about English, they can find me on YouTube just using my name, Daniel Welsh, or they can go to one of my blogs, madridingles.net, for example. I guess maybe you have show notes or something with this
Yeah,
podcast
definitely.
where you can have that spelt out.
It's
But yeah,
yeah, episode 123. So if you search for that, then you'll see the show notes underneath. I'll be sure to put those links in there.
great.
And looking forward to seeing you somewhere around the world. Hopefully in Spain. I do love Spain. I must say myself. I've
Oh
only
yeah.
been there twice, but I think I don't know if it's a good place to live though. I mean, you've obviously lived there a long time, but for me personally, I think that it's for my initial reaction. It's a very nice place to be for a short
Yeah.
period of time because especially during the summer, I can imagine it gets quite crazy with the heat and the tourists and like the what's going on. But when I was there for a week, it was amazing to be out late, eat at amazing places, and you got the great produce and products everywhere. You have quality cheeses and meats just in abundance. That was
Yeah,
fantastic.
definitely. We eat better than a lot of people in a lot of countries. And, even sort of on a budget, you still can get pretty good food here. And, otherwise, I really love Spain. A lot of people from, the US or Canada or Northern European countries, their enjoyment is kind of limited by their tolerance of lower salaries.
Mm,
And, I wasn't earning very much money back in the US, so for me, this was actually pretty good. And so I had no big issue with lower salaries for years and years. But if you have big student loans or something, Spain makes that difficult because it's hard to earn a salary that's comparable to what you would get in the UK or whatever.
right, for sure. But I think also the whole expat question. I mean, I really enjoy talking about relocating, especially to the country of the language you're studying or the culture you're interested in. I think for many that is the dream
Yeah.
when it comes to this.
I think everybody should have the experience of living outside their country, at least for a few months. It's a really, eye-opening experience any way you do it. So,
Yeah.
with learning or not, just go somewhere and hang out as long as your visa will let you, and it'll definitely teach you a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just on the last minute here. So, is there anything about the U.S. that you ever miss or have missed during your time in Spain?
It's been so long that no, I don't really miss much about the US. I originally missed a lot of, cultural stuff, but now everything's on the internet and I can, watch TV shows if I, want to watch the TV shows in original version. I can get on the internet and do that somehow, and I can get English books on Amazon. And yeah, the internet's really made the whole expat situation a lot less taxing, I think, that you don't have to, have a complete disconnect with
Right.
your past.
And I guess if you're not Spanish speaking and you move there, there's still English language meetups, and there's still like communities of expats that meet up and have different kind of groups, and
Yeah.
and I guess you can get everything done in English. Not that we want to encourage that on a language learning podcast, but maybe if you need a little bit of a early encouragement or just give it a shot, you might want to start out with that. It is possible to get by, I suppose, in Madrid
Yeah,
and Barcelona.
I don't think you'd have a great experience if you like went to a government office and tried to speak to them only in English. And, if you have to go to the doctor or the hospital or something,
Yeah,
it's a lot better for you if you know enough Spanish to get by, or bring a trusted friend. But yeah, a lot of stuff you can get done if you're just walking around and ordering beer and hamburgers. Then you can do that in English at this point in most parts of the world, I assume.
oh yeah, for sure. I think so. But it does get more exciting when you start to pick up the local language
Yeah.
and become a part. And you've truly assimilated, I must say. This you've really become part of the culture, and I guess you couldn't imagine it any other way at this point.
No, it's funny that I feel more happy about some of the experiences I had back in the US, just because it's been so long. I'm more proud of being an American, or whatever Americans are supposed to say about this. Um, but also, I don't have to deal with that anymore on any deep level, and I can just be happy here in Spain. And yeah, nobody's ever going to look at me and my big red beard and think I'm Spanish.
Right.
But I am able to handle the culture in a pretty good way, and it's definitely been a great experience.
Do people reply to you in English a lot?
Here in Barcelona, it's more common, and in Madrid, not so much. In Madrid, they're not as intent on learning languages, but in the coastal cities, generally, people are more used to tourists, and so they'll just hit you with the English straight up.
Right. And you tell them, or you just continue.
Yeah, I mean, we work something out. I don't get offended if somebody imagines I don't speak Spanish because I really don't look like anybody's idea of a Spanish speaker.
Right.
So, I speak to them in English or Spanish or a mix, and we just, figure something out.
And I don't think that one should be offended by that anyway, because it's not about you. It's just they're used to a certain group of people visiting,
Yeah.
and that's just completely automated for them. They're not looking at you thinking, "Oh, you said hello in a terrible accent, so you must not be able to speak anything."
Yeah,
It's nothing
nobody's
personal.
able to look at another person and guess their whole life story. So,
Exactly, and actually, not to keep dragging dragging on the outro here, but I just had an interesting experience in London where I was at a Scandinavian place, and I wasn't sure what the protocol was for just asking if somebody speaks my language either. So
yeah,
it's kind of a funny situation because the place is called Scandinavian Kitchen, and they sell stuff from Scandinavia.
yeah,
So I'm like, are they Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, or are they just English, normal English people just hired to be, a clerk there? So I just pretended I was English and just did it in that. But I'm wondering what the protocol would be in, like in figuring that out. Because I also feel it's a little bit rude to just go up to people and say, "Do you speak this?" when you're not in that country. I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
yeah. Well, my girlfriend is Indian, and so we go to Indian restaurants, and she'll look at the waiter or whatever, and he'll look back at her, and I can see there's this moment where deciding whether to speak English because they probably both speaking. Well, my girlfriend definitely speaks English, but they probably can do pretty well with English. They could speak Spanish because we're in Spain, or they could, pick an Indian language and
Yeah.
see how that works. And I've seen this with her multiple times, and it's just for me, I find it hilarious. But yeah, it's got to be sort of a complex protocol
Yeah.
to figure out which language you should speak to somebody in.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's funny anyway, but yeah, I can just imagine that situation in the restaurant, especially with countries that have multiple languages.
Yeah, India has so many languages.
That's amazing. Well, anyway, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your life story and views on the world and language learning and teaching
Thanks
and
for having me.
Spanish. It's a pleasure to hear some fresh perspectives and yeah, like I said, I think it's really cool what you've done, and when you look at it this much later, was it 15 years on, 14 years on, it sounds so effortless. Oh, I just moved to Madrid. Oh, I just learned Spanish. Oh, I just started a blog. Of course, you always have to appreciate the work that's gone into every single week of your life in that time. But at the same time, I think anyone can really do it. Anyone can replicate it, going to the country of where they want to go with the language they want to speak and build something, whether that's becoming the best German teacher in Taiwan or I don't know. Anyone can build it up. I think we live in a time where anything's possible. So I think it's cool.
Yeah, I guess I make it sound effortless, but the key is just the long period of time.
Consistency.
Consistency. Yeah, it's like I was doing this every day for a long period of time, and I was doing things that I enjoyed, which always helps to make it seem like less of an effort.
Yeah, and that's exactly like language learning itself. So in that way, we've come full circle and just do things you enjoy and do them consistently, and you will see that whatever it is you want to achieve will become a success.
Definitely.